Hello and welcome. Before we get started, I have a few reminders to share. Interpretation can be selected by clicking the globe symbol option on the bottom of the screen, as shown on the slide, and selecting your preferred language. You are welcome to submit questions for our experts throughout the webinar. We will be taking questions using the question and answer function only. You can find the Q&A button as noted on the screen. If your question is not answered live today, we will respond to it by email after the webinar. Please ensure that you are logged in with your email address so we can get in touch with you. Here's a look at the agenda for today. We will start with a look at grain farming in Canada, including presentations from Canadian farmers to hear about their growing season, and then have a question and answer session. Next, a market outlook containing information on the growing season and supply and demand will be given. There will be another opportunity to ask questions. We will be joined by a representative from the Canadian Grain Commission to hear the results of the Canadian Grain Commission's harvest evaluations. Then, the Cereals Canada technical team will join us to share their quality and functionality assessments of the 2025 Canadian wheat harvest. Following the quality assessments, the experts will be available to answer your questions. I would also like to mention that this session is being recorded, so it can be watched again later and shared with your colleagues. We will notify everyone who registered when the recording is posted. We have a lot to share with you today, so let's get started.
Hello, my name is Lisa Nemeth. I'm the Director of Market Support and Training at Cereals Canada. Welcome to the 2025 New Wheat Crop Report.
Welcome to Cereals Canada. For over 50 years, our 6 technical labs have been located in an office tower in downtown Winnipeg. In that time, we've welcomed over 100,000 global buyers, farmers, value chain members, and the agriculture industry to our facility. We are the voice of the Canadian cereals value chain, and we pride ourselves on market access support, customer engagement, and technical excellence. Welcome to a tour of Cereals Canada. First stop, our pilot-scale commercial mill. This compact system mirrors full-size facilities and can produce up to 10 tons of flour every 24 hours, giving customers a true picture of how their wheat will perform on their industrial mills. Next, to the analytical lab, which is similar to quality control facilities found in commercial flour mills. Here, we test the milled wheat, as well as other cereals and specialty crops for quality. We gather data on protein, ash content, gluten strength, and extensibility, and falling numbers, to name a few, turning every sample into hard numbers so our customers, exporters, and processors know exactly what to expect from this year's crop. Here in our pilot and test bakeries, we produce baked products from around the world, including pan bread, baguettes, croissants, chocopan, cookies, pita, and hearth bread. Our experts assess every loaf for quality, such as loaf volume, color, and crumb structure. In pasta and extrusion technology, we produce long and short pastas, including spaghetti and macaroni, as well as other extruded products, letting buyers see how Canadian durum and specialty grains perform in real-world pasta lines. The last end products area on our tour is where our experts demonstrate the versatility of Canadian wheat by producing Asian noodles and steamed buns, analyzing color and texture so companies can meet regional preferences. Finally, our specialty mills process oats, pulses, and other grains into high-protein flours and blends, focusing on nutrition and functionality for plant-based foods of today and tomorrow. From analytics to end products, our dedicated experts operate under one roof in the heart of Winnipeg. We do this for over 80 markets around the world, demonstrating that Canadian cereals are high quality and backing it with world-class customer support. Imagine what's possible when we build for the next era. See our vision for the future. Learn more about the new home for Cereals Canada at gate-canada.ca.
Hi everyone, I'm Dean Dias, CEO of Cereals Canada. We are a leading voice for the Canadian cereals industry and a trusted source of quality information when it comes to wheat, barley and oats. We work with our customers so that they are successful in using Canadian cereals in their end products by providing technical support, training, education and market support. Canada is globally known for its high quality wheat, barley, durum and oats, and I'm pleased to say this year we've had another successful crop. Today you'll hear about the 2025 wheat crop from our experts. Some of the wheat might already be reaching your mills or is probably on its way. Canada is on track to be the third largest wheat exporter in the world and also the #1 exporter of high quality, high protein wheat. In this year, which is 2025-2026 year, we are expected to export close to 27.4 million tons of wheat to 80 countries around the world, and some of them are your countries. So please enjoy the webinar. Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to the 2025 New Wheat Crop Report webinar. We're coming to you live from Winnipeg, Canada. I'm Lisa Nemeth. I'm Director of Market Support and Training at Cereals Canada, and I'll be your host for this webinar. Today, you will hear from Cereals Canada experts and members of the Canadian value chain. In just a moment, you will meet Scott Jesperson, a wheat farmer from Alberta, and Josh Borson, who grows winter wheat in Ontario. Following their presentations, you will have the opportunity to ask questions using the Q&A function on your screen. But first, let's take a look at grain farming in Canada.
How can we describe grain farming in a country as big as Canada, where grain farms come in all shapes and sizes, from coast to coast, all across the country? What could all these farms possibly have in common? Well, it's the big things. Like how we take pride in growing the highest quality grains on the planet by leading with science-based decisions, the best crop management practices, and the latest technology, while maintaining the highest standards of safety. It's our passion for growing food sustainably. How we strive to grow more food while conserving soil and water. How we respect, protect, and navigate nature while staying resilient to all the challenges it brings. It's our drive to deliver good, nutritious food, the staples people rely on here and around the globe. Our work is supporting families, benefiting rural communities, driving the economy. Our values, our passion, our commitment, they're what make us who we are and what makes Canadian grain the best in the world. This is grain farming in Canada.
My name's Scott Jesperson. I farm with my son Ryan and my dad, and our farm's been in our family for just over 100 years.
We have 5 crops that we grow. We grow spring wheat, barley, oats, peas, and canola. And we do a bunch of alfalfa and grass hay as well, and we have about 150 beef cows as well. My name is Scott Jesperson, and I am the owner and operator of our family farm. In my presentation, I will share about my family farm and our best farm management practices, our growing season, and about our sustainable practices that enable us to consistently produce top quality wheat and grains for our global customers. While each year the growing season is different, as a Canadian farmer, I am committed to working with the environment to grow safe, nutritious, sustainable, high-quality food. Canadian farmers rely on science for innovation and regulations. We purchase the best seed varieties and use sustainable practices to consistently produce top-quality wheat and grains. Canadian farmers are reliant on you, as our customers, to continue to choose quality and choose Canadian. My family farm is called Blue Jay Farms Limited. Our farm is over 120 years old, started by my great-grandfather who emigrated from Denmark. I am a fourth-generation farmer. We were the first dairy farm in our area in 1949, but now run a mixed farm with 3,000 acres of cropland and 120 Black Angus cow-calf operation. As a family farm, we are not that unique. 97% of Canadian farms are family-owned. I farm with my sons Ryan and Tyler and my dad, and even though he is retired, our family mission statement is faith, family, and farming. Putting family first, having a healthy work-life balance, live generously, stay balanced, and give back. Being community-minded. These are my guiding principles and values. I have completed a Bachelor of Science in Agricultural Business Management from the University of Alberta. I am also the chairman of Alberta Grain, our province's largest agricultural organization. Our farm is located in Spruce Grove, Alberta, about 20 minutes from the capital city of Edmonton, Alberta, and 3 hours from the Rocky Mountains. It is located in the black soil zone of the prairies and is mostly a loamy clay type soil. Our climate is fairly moderate for Western Canada. Being further south in Canada, we generally get a good long growing season with reasonable moisture. Within Canada, the temperate zone has significant variation in frost-free days, soils, annual rainfall, snowfall, and topography. We usually grow spring wheat, oats, canola, and peas. We also grow feed and malt barley. What we decide to grow from year to year is typically based on a fairly set crop rotation of cereal, pulse, oilseeds, and legumes. This rotation provides an adequate break between similar crops to help control potential crop pests, such as insects and disease. Also, as part of our pest management system, every 5 years we take a field or two and put it into an alfalfa grass mix for our cows. This year, we planted 2 new hayfields to alfalfa grass as determined by our crop rotation strategy. When I am choosing seed varieties, I look for wheat varieties that are resistant to disease with good yield potential and that will produce the quality that customers are looking for. Choosing good new seed varieties is extremely important, and we replace them every 3 years. Canada is known for its quality around the world, and as Canadian farmers, we are constantly striving for quality. To achieve the best quality, farmers rely on science and research to provide them options for agronomic practices, best seed varieties, and crop protection products. As farmers, we invest heavily in research to achieve the best results for the farm, which ensures our quality stays consistent and top-notch. Many of the investments we make on the farm are for crop quality and yield. These include things like modern grain storage facilities, grain drying equipment, modern farm equipment with GPS, and yield mapping capabilities. Let me share a brief recap of our growing season. 2025 was certainly an interesting year on our farm. We started the year with excellent moisture, and this continued throughout the growing season. I could say it was almost perfect for growing our crops. Most of that rain fell in the seeding season, which made timely planting tricky, but because of our modern seeding equipment, we were able to get the crop in very quickly in the limited time available. We purchase new seed every year for all of our crops. The decision of which seeds to purchase are usually made about 6 months prior to planting to ensure we get the exact varieties we want. Purchasing new seed every year ensures we stay up to date with the most current genetics, providing the latest in disease resistance, improved quality, and highest yield. We generally purchase our fertilizer about 6 months in advance of seeding when the price is lower, saving on crop input costs. In spring, we load seed and fertilizer in separate compartments in our drill and apply everything our crop needs in one single pass over the field. Fertilizer application rates are based on our farm field maps from the previous year and soil samples which are done by a local agronomist every year. Once seeding is finished, we typically monitor the crops daily. We have an independent agronomist who looks at all of our fields regularly and keeps a close eye on any emerging crop pest problems, whether they be weeds, insects, or diseases. Every field is scouted at least multiple times prior to the application of any crop protection product, and we use industry standard science-based thresholds to make decisions on those applications. As a crop matures and we get closer to harvest, we usually start to scout more closely for disease in the crop. If a significant crop disease in cereals is found, we will apply a fungicide to reduce and hopefully eliminate the severity of the disease. At harvest time, my son and I harvest a crop with one large John Deere X9 combine and 2 Kenworth grain trucks. We bring all the grain to our farm yard for storage or to be dried if necessary. We generally start to harvest the crop when it is just above what is considered dry. As always, we are constantly looking at the weather and try and harvest in dry conditions. We also have excellent modern storage bins on our farm with large aeration fans that help dry the crop after it is in the bin. The same fans also help maintain the condition of the grain and keep it free from insects or spoilage throughout the winter. These bins are accessible 12 months of the year, so we can haul grain anytime we are required or whenever the market conditions are favorable. I'm proud to be a 4th generation farmer, and my son hopes to continue this tradition and become the 5th. I'm also very proud to say that, as a Canadian farmer, I am among the most productive and sustainable farmers growing the highest quality wheat in the world. It's rewarding to see how that hard work pays off as a nutritious meal for someone half a world away from my farm. On behalf of Canadian grain farmers, I want to thank you for listening to my presentation about grain farming in Canada and to learn more about my farming operation. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Josh Borson. I am a grain farmer and a director with Grain Farmers of Ontario and Cereals Canada. I'm joining you here today to talk about the growing season for Ontario's soft red winter wheat crop. Hello, my name is Josh Borson, and I will be sharing with our customers, value chain members, and stakeholders a bit about my family farm today. My family farm is called Brady Farms. I am a 3rd generation farmer, farming alongside my father. My great-grandparents immigrated from Holland in the early 1950s, and we have been in the country for close to 75 years, farming in the same area where we are now. I farm with my father and family, as I mentioned, and I have 3 young kids, and they may aspire to be the 4th generation on our farm. I attended college in London, Ontario, receiving an advanced diploma in mechanical engineering with a specialization in heavy equipment design. In addition to being a farmer, I am also a board director with Cereals Canada and a board member with our local provincial commodity association, Grain Farmers of Ontario. Our farm is located in southwestern Ontario, which is in the Great Lakes Basin of Canada. This region is very temperate. It provides ideal growing conditions for winter wheat, with over 85% of Canada's soft red winter wheat grown in this region. The soil in our region can vary quite a bit, and especially from farm to farm, but even within the farm. We often have everything from peaty black earth soils or muck soils to clay soils and loams as well, or a mix of all 3. Within Canada, the temperate zone has significant variations in frost-free days, soils, annual rainfall, snowfall, and topography. But where we are, our climate is fairly moderate for Canada, and Ontario has some of the southernmost regions in Canada, so we generally have a good long growing season with ample moisture. We are far enough south that we line up with California as a latitude for those interested in where we lie geographically. And because of the Great Lakes, we often experience significant amounts of rainfall throughout the year, meaning we don't require any irrigation to manage our crops through the growing season. On our farm, we generally grow winter wheat, corn, soybeans, and edible beans, and more recently we've started to grow winter canola as well. While the amount of crops we grow can vary from year to year, we always look to plant wheat on our farm in this rotation. Winter wheat is seeded in the fall after bean harvest, and because of this, there can be weather challenges late in the year that impact how much wheat we are able to grow. Every year on our farm, we will evaluate 1 or 2 new wheat varieties to ensure that we are always improving upon the crop we produce. In Ontario, there is a Cereal Crops Committee, and they conduct annual performance testing on new varieties coming into the system, assessing each variety's potential and ensuring that those varieties made available to farmers will perform well and from a yield point of view, from a disease point of view, but also from a quality point of view for our customers. With that, they assess milling and baking performance to ensure that these approved varieties will deliver consistent quality for cookies, crackers, cakes, coatings, and many more things. And truthfully, wheat remains one of our favorite crops to grow year over year. Winter wheat follows a different schedule than most other crops. As you can see on this timeline, Ontario's winter wheat crop is typically planted in September and October. Following planting and establishment in the autumn, the wheat crop pauses its growth or goes dormant during our winter cold months. But when spring returns, the wheat wakes up, breaks dormancy, and starts to quickly begin growing again. By early to midsummer, around July, wheat is ready to harvest. This does vary slightly based on your geography in the province. Some harvests can start as early as June, and many can drag out as late as into September, but typically harvest starts around July or August. And when we reach October, we again are looking to reestablish the winter wheat crop for the following year. The soft red winter wheat that customers will be or are currently receiving started out with seeding over a year ago in the fall of 2024. We experienced some of the best field conditions for seeding that we've had in many, many years, and this led to a significant amount of wheat being seeded with near record winter wheat acreage planted across the province of Ontario. In our region, we had one of the heaviest winters we've had in over 20 years, experiencing significant amounts of rainfall, or rather snowfall, and very cold temperatures for a prolonged period of time. Now, generally, we do need good snow cover on the wheat to protect it from the cold, so it can be a good thing as long as we don't have too much rain in the spring to cause winter kill or drowning in the crop. But overall, the wheat did come through the winter very well, and winter kill across the province was about average or what we would have expected. Soon after the snow is melted from the field, we begin to manage our crop's growth. Nitrogen and sulfur fertilizers are applied strategically to minimize losses, but also to improve and to enhance our wheat's production. On our farm, we work with an agronomist to build fertility recommendations to provide us with timely reports on the crop's growth progress. If issues are observed in the field through scouting, we will together discuss a plan to correct them following our integrated pest management approach, or IPM. This approach ensures that we only target pests and diseases when they reach a critical level, or a threshold as we call them, and that we use the most effective and least environmentally impactful tools to deal with those issues as they arise. Warm spring weather, adequate rains, and targeted nutrient management across the province have led to very good yields at or above the average for most farmers. We did not experience any major or widespread disease or pest pressures in Ontario this year. And as we near harvest in Ontario, we are often faced with weather challenges due to thunderstorms or pop-up rain events that can happen throughout the summer. Because of this, we typically look to target harvesting our wheat as quickly as possible. And for us on our farm, that means that we'll often start harvest when the grain moisture is up to 20%. Well, because of harvesting this grain before it's actually dry enough to be shipped to end users, we have equipment on our farm to dry and condition the grain to the trade levels of moisture. And the reason that we go to this added step is often for our customers' benefit the most. We like to say that nothing good happens to wheat once it begins to mature, and wheat doesn't weather well most often when we get these rain events. So from a milling perspective, to ensure that we have the utmost quality, we harvest early to preserve those quality aspects that are very important to our customers and that they've come to expect. Across the province, farmers had a long dry harvest window. We were very, very dry throughout the months of July and August, and it continued into September post-harvest. So with that, our Grain Farmers of Ontario Wheat Quality Survey saw 98% of the soft red winter wheat crop graded at milling grade with slightly elevated protein levels. Average test weights and high falling numbers were also noted. There were almost no instances of fusarium or pre-harvest sprouting noticed. And once harvest is complete, we're able to store the grain on our farm until we need to deliver it to an end user or a terminal for export. At this time, we have already completed planting for our 2026 soft red winter wheat crop. Soybeans were harvested pretty quickly due to the drier conditions we experienced in the early fall. And because of that, we had a bit of an extended window to achieve our wheat planting as well, with even some instances of it being so dry that the wheat crop was slow to emerge in some regions until we received some adequate rainfall. We don't have formal estimates yet, but initial reporting is indicating another strong planting year, meeting our full acreage potential into 2026. And winter wheat's living roots and seasonal ground cover provide regenerative benefits for the soil. We experience reduced erosion, increased soil organic matter, better water infiltration. And on top of that, many farmers in Eastern Canada also plant cover crops following their wheat, which provide similar benefits again. Winter wheat is one of the best stories for our province when it comes to protecting the soil, preserving it, and enhancing it for growth of other crops throughout our growing cycle. Thank you, and I look forward to continuing our conversations as we go forward.
Welcome to you, Scott and Josh. Let's take some time to learn more about your farming practices and what it takes to grow a high quality crop. Canada is known around the world for its high quality wheat, and we know that Canadian farmers like you are constantly striving for this high quality. It all starts before you've even planted the crop with choosing good varieties, maintaining soil health, and land preparation and equipment. So Scott, as a farmer from Western Canada, how do you choose the wheat varieties to grow on your farm?
So on our farm, at the end of the growing season, I always review the data that we collect during the growing season. I look at the variety that I've grown. I look at the yield, which is most important for us because it dictates profitability on the farm. I look at the protein levels that we have. I look at the qualities. Did it stand well? Was it easy to harvest? And once I review that, then I'll probably grow that variety in the next growing cycle. I also like to add a new variety in, and that new variety has to be very similar to the current variety that I have. I base that on how that current variety grew in the past growing season. Does it fit on our farm? Does it grow in the soil conditions that we have? Does it fit in the weather conditions? And if it does, then I will grow that wheat variety again. It's also worth noting that there are no GMO wheat varieties growing in Canada.
Thanks, Scott. Josh, from your perspective in Eastern Canada, what are the deciding factors when it comes to what you select to grow?
Well, thanks, Lisa. A lot of the decisions that we make would be, similar to what Scott had described there. In Ontario, or at least specifically for our farm, there are government-funded trials of new varieties annually done in the province, and those are monitored a little bit through a special committee comprised of industry and farmers and government people working in the government that evaluate these new hybrids or new varieties that are being proposed to grow for the next growing season. So as a farmer, what we would do, or what I would do, is go look at those trial results on an annual basis, look at the new varieties, look at how our varieties that we're currently growing are stacking up, and then we would make decisions at that point to begin investing in the latest genetics, begin trying those genetics on our farm and seeing if they're fit for our farm specifically. Sometimes they may perform well in other regions and they don't perform well on our farm. So every year we're always evaluating at least one or two new varieties and ensuring that they do meet kind of the specifications that we need, but also that our customers need. You know, for a farmer, as Scott mentioned, yield is a driving factor for our production on the farm, for our productivity. But at the same time, we do need to pay attention to quality. If there's some risks to our farm for maybe low falling number would be an issue for customers, or maybe a protein concern, we take that into account as well as we go through the season. So when that wheat gets harvested and then we sell it or we ship it off to exporters or end users locally, we make sure that we get some feedback on the quality of the wheat, and then that helps to further inform our decision on what we will grow next year. But it's important to know that all this process is done independent of any government body or regulatory authority in Canada. These are all decisions that we make on our farm, on our own as independent business people, as independent farmers. We're doing our best to make sure that we provide a good, high quality product that performs well every year for us. So generally we'll grow consistent varieties year over year, and then as new varieties come along, we will make the transition to those once we've evaluated their fit for us.
Great, thank you, Josh. So each year, the growing season is different. As a Canadian farmer, we know you're committed to working with the environment to grow this safe, nutritious, sustainable, high quality food. And we heard earlier about your growing season this last year. And now with harvest pretty much done, I'm sure you're preparing for next growing season. What are some of the things that you do to ensure that it'll be successful, Josh?
Well, Lisa, due to the nature of our growing season with winter wheat in Eastern Canada, we actually have a fairly close or tight window to make some of those key decisions like variety selection and things like that, because just shortly after harvest, about a month or two following wheat harvest, we have our bean harvest, and it's after bean harvest that we actually plant our winter wheat again. So we'll be looking even before the wheat crop is harvested to try and make some of those planting decisions ahead of time. We will do some soil testing if necessary to evaluate our nutrient needs for the crop, and we will do those variety assessments like we discussed shortly after the crop is harvested to immediately make those plans coming up in just a couple months. On our farm, we work with an agronomist to help provide some outside perspective and expertise in our operation and what we need to grow and how we need to grow it to be the most successful. We pay very close attention to our nutrient management plan and our strategy. And what I mean by that is we're making sure that we target exactly the right amount of fertilizer required to produce the most crop that we can, given what we know. With winter wheat, because of the planting season being in the fall, sometimes we get a short planting season. And so we need to maybe retool or prepare for that given what the fall harvest is like. So we do this every year as we go from a planning point of view, but then throughout the growing season as well, we will sit down with our agronomist and there'll be scouting reports given to us by the agronomist that provide updates on the crop and then provide feedback on different practices that maybe we need to use to prevent disease or to deal with weeds or pests. We follow IPM on our farm, which is integrated pest management. So we will only be doing applications of any products to protect our crop or to help it grow based on need rather than maybe a prophylactic approach where you would try and prevent issues ahead of time. And this ensures that we're only doing what's needed when it's needed.
Great, thanks, Josh. Scott, could you share your perspective from Western Canada?
Yeah, sure, Lisa. Much of what Josh said, we do on our farm as well. We usually start with annual soil testing of each of our fields. This test gives us a benchmark for what nutrients the crop requires for next year and the correct amounts, and a prediction of crop profitability. On our farm, we also use field mapping. This technology allows us to map all of our field operations These operations include all of our seeding, spraying, and harvesting. Right now, we have about 5 years of data for each of our fields. And at the end of the harvest, we will sit down in our office and we'll overlay all of those maps onto one another. And this gives us a very accurate indication of how the wheat crop used those nutrients we added during the growing season. And it helps us to determine our yield as well. So these maps allow us to use variable rate fertilizer application more accurately. We only add the nutrients in the areas of the field where they need them. And likewise, we also reduce nutrients in areas that do not need the fertilizer for the crop in that field. So ultimately, we are only applying the right rate of fertilizer at the right time and in the right place. And so this reduces cost to the farm, and it's really sustainable for the environment. We use all of this data and when we choose our crop rotations for the next following year. And from all of these farm management practices, we have noticed that our soil organic matter is increasing. And as we prioritize these practices, our soil is becoming more healthy. And we all know that good, healthy soil is the foundation for a good quality crop, and it's sustainable for our farm into the future.
Great comments, thank you. And from what we've heard you both say so far, science and innovation have helped Canadian farmers, and we've touched on good varieties, nutrients, soil testing, and the field mapping that you do. Can you share about on-farm storage? Josh, you had strong yields. How do you store your grain on your farm? And what are some of the practices that you do to ensure storage quality?
Thanks, Lisa. And you're absolutely right. You know, we go to all the trouble every year of making sure that we grow a good crop, and it can all fall apart if you're not careful on your storage and your conditioning of your grain. And that's something we take very seriously. In Ontario, or on our farm specifically, we often have to start our harvest before the grain has actually reached a dry state or a trade moisture. And so with that in mind, we will often dry our grain through our grain handling and storage facilities to ensure that quality. The reason for that is most often where we are, we get a significant amount of rain in the summer sometimes through thunderstorms or pop-up showers. And during harvest, that can create a lot of problems with harvest itself, but also with grain quality. Wheat, nothing really good happens to wheat once it's reached full maturity and it's started to dry down when it comes from a weather point of view. So we ensure that we get the grain off the field as quickly as we can. We will harvest sometimes at 20% moisture to make sure of that quality. And then once it's dried down and conditioned, we will put it into storage, and we're very, very careful about maintaining clean storage facilities. We do not want to have any issues with insect pests or rodents. We have very secure storage facilities for our grain. We use steel bins or silos that are very rodent and pest proof to a great extent. And we take steps to make sure that we don't have insect issues, because it's very possible that our grain may need to stay on the farm for many months before the end user requires it.
Thank you, Josh. Scott, can you share what happens in Western Canada for grain storage?
Yeah, sure, Lisa, I can do that. So depending on the growing season and what happens during harvest, we may be using our grain drying equipment to store our grain on the farm until we mark it and deliver it into the Canadian grain handling system. First, it'll go to the elevator, then it goes by rail to the ports, and then finally it's shipped out to you, our customers around the world. The main technology we use in Western Canada is a grain dryer, and that helps us maintain quality. Depending on the year, the grain dryer helps us harvest our crops at the right time. It enables us to control the moisture, which gives us ideal levels for storage in our bins, as Josh has mentioned. Most farms in Western Canada have enough on-farm storage for about half of their crop production. So it's important that when we deliver into our elevators, that the whole value chain system is working so that those crops can get out to the ports and out to our customers. We also monitor the grain in our bins with temperature and moisture cables. So that gives us real-time data. And if we ever need to cool off the grain for optimal storage, we will turn on large aeration fans in our bins. And in Western Canada, it's maybe unique. In our areas, temperatures can get to minus 40 degrees for many, many weeks. And that also helps kill the insects and keeps fungal diseases in check as well in our bins. So we always look forward to a robust winter of minus 40 weather in Western Canada to help us maintain great grain storage quality.
Thanks, Scott. Winter is coming, so I expect that we'll be seeing that soon. If we could move now just to talk a little bit about some of the other work that has been benefiting you from science. Canadian growers are committed to meeting very stringent standards. What are some ways you use science and research to drive decisions on your farm to meet or exceed these standards? Scott, can we start with you?
Yeah, sure, Lisa. So on our farm, there's always a huge network of scientists and extension specialists in our area, and we use those to help drive decisions on our farm. There's specialists from Cereals Canada that we also use. There's a few other things that we do on our farm. We use local weather stations throughout the growing season. That gives us records of what the rain levels were, the temperatures are, and we can assess that as we look at the crop and we do our scouting through the growing season. We subscribe to satellite imagery, so it's a snapshot of the crop during the growing season. I think we get updates every few days, and it allows us to look at how the crop is progressing. The most important tool that we use on our farm is we subscribe to the John Deere technology platform, and this platform records all of the field operations that we do on our farm for growing that crop, especially wheat. It breaks down all the costs associated for growing that wheat crop. I know that there is other systems out there that other farmers use, but it's really about accessing all of that data, synthesizing it, how we can use it to make better decisions for our farm and to be more informed and to grow a crop that's profitable for us so that we're here in the future.
That's great. Thank you. Josh, how about you? How has scientific research benefited your production?
Well, Lisa, the short answer to that is more, I guess you could say. Scientific research is crucial to our success in a lot of ways. And with that, what I mean is that, certainly we are looking to produce more grain from each area, from each acre, from each hectare of our land, but also to maintain the quality on that. The scientific research in the last decade has been able to continually improve that. Certainly science has provided technology for customers to be more stringent in their evaluation of the grain that we provide. And so on the other hand, then we also need to find ways to meet that stringent standard, I think. And we've been able to do that now, and we'll continue to be able to do that in the future as long as we continue to have those investments in our research and our science programs here in the province and in Canada nationally. It's been able to, in the last 10 years, we used to have issues with fusarium in our wheat crop in Ontario. And I can tell you that in the last 3 years and maybe even going forward, it's become almost a non-issue on an annual basis. We have tools now available to the farmers that are very, very effective, and we can manage that very, very well. And that helps our customers at the end of the day, and it helps us as well. Things like that we've been able to do over the last 5 to 10 years, the growth we've been able to see are all basically due in part to scientific research, better understanding of farmers and their practices. And so I see this continuing for the foreseeable future as long as we continue to invest in it. And because we see returns on our farm, we will continue to invest.
That's excellent news. Thanks, Josh. So thank you both for being part of the webinar. I'd like to offer you any closing comments. And Scott, maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Lisa. Our farm has been in our family for well over 100 years. I'm a fourth generation farmer. My son is now at the age where he is moving into the farm, and he's a fifth generation farmer. We hope that this tradition continues. I'm very proud to say that as a Canadian farmer, we are among the most productive and sustainable farmers in the world. We grow the highest quality wheat, and we're going to continue to do that. Um, and it's rewarding to kind of see that all of this hard work that we do on a yearly basis is a good nutritious meal for someone half a world away from me. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Josh, a chance for comments from you.
Well, thanks, Lisa. And, at this point, really, I think from a Canadian farmer to our customers globally, thank you for continuing to put your faith in what we grow and what we do on an annual basis. I think that we deliver some of the highest quality wheat in the world and will continue to do so. And I think because of customers' commitments to buying Canadian wheat, stories like Scott's will continue to develop and grow throughout the years to come. Our farm is not quite as storied as Scott's is yet, but I guess with dedication from our customers and our own dedication to providing high quality product, we might get there one day. We're only about 50 or 75 years into our story here in Canada as a family on the farm, but really appreciate everyone coming to watch this, and thank you, Lisa and Scott, for the day.
Well, welcome, Scott. This is a great opportunity for our customers to ask a Canadian farmer their questions about growing Canadian wheat. If anyone has questions, please do continue to submit them to using the Q&A function, and ensure that you are logged in with your email address in case we need to get back to you by email. So, Scott, I will ask you the first question that's come in, which is, how important is publicly funded breeding for you?
Yeah, thanks, Lisa, for the question. We need really good wheat varieties on our farm so that our farmers are productive, they are profitable, and they're here in the future. So, from the perspective of Alberta Grains, we invest in three public breeding institutions in Western Canada, one in Saskatoon, one in Manitoba, and one in our own province. Those institutions are funded quite heavily from farmer checkoff dollars, and that research really benefits us on the farm as all these new varieties that come out have special qualities and traits for us, and it's probably one of the most important things that Alberta Grains invests in is in those research institutions to get those new and improved varieties out so farmers can grow these excellent wheat crops for our customers.
Yeah, and those great quality crops are what makes the customers happy too. So let's move on to another question, and a little bit more general. Can you share some of the challenges that you faced in your growing season this year?
Sure, that's a great question as well. As in farming, there's always challenges, and this year we faced a couple of them. One of them that comes to mind is equipment breakdowns is always a challenge, and this year we had a few breakdowns, some that were a little bit more difficult to fix, but we have a great dealer network. We have great specialists who can come out to the farm and fix it, and they got us back up and running within record time, so we were able to get our seeding done, and at harvest as well. We have breakdowns, and we were able to get finished as well. Probably the most interesting challenge we had this year was we started off with such an excellent growing season. We ended up producing a record harvest, a record yield with excellent qualities. We weren't really prepared for this. So instead of piling all this quality wheat on the ground, we had to invest in some storage bins, as was mentioned before. So we took on a little more capital expenditure, but there's nothing better than putting good quality crop in a bin and able to keep it there. So when our customers want it, we can deliver it into the value chain, and that was something that was an extra cost, but I think in the long run, it pays off in the future for our customers.
Oh, I think other customers will be appreciating that very much. So that was a challenge. Could you maybe end off by sharing what a big win or two from this past growing season would be for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess a really good win would be to see all this great crop production that we produce in Western Canada get to our customers. We are also excited about probably investing in our variable rate technology that was mentioned in my presentation. We invested heavily in equipment that can help us be profitable, but it's also good for the environment as we are able to put specific rates of fertilizer down on our crops at the right place, and the crop can use this. This technology is just going to get better. It allows us to reduce our costs per acre. It allows the plant to get the exact nutrients that they need. And with this technology, we're looking forward to seeing increased yield and increased quality going forward. It's something that most farmers in Western Canada have adopted, and it's probably the future of farming is variable rate technology.
Great. Okay. I've just had one other question come in. And it's you mentioned the high yields you got, and the question is around the high global wheat supplies expected this year. Is that going to impact your strategy as a farmer, maybe in what you're planting next year?
Yeah, it's always a concern when we look at, there's competition in the marketplace. We compete with other customers. I think we have a bit of an advantage because we grow such a high quality crop, so it's probably more valuable. That's probably the biggest challenge for us is that you know we're profitable based on price, and we always have to watch what other countries are doing, and we're a price conscious industry. So yeah, price is something that we do watch. Most of our rotation is already set, so we're probably not going to switch out of wheat. It just fits into our farm. I would imagine as we go through, we'll look at those market signals and there will be some shifts, but we really stay with a standard secure rotation. So I wouldn't say that our wheat acres are going to go up or down, but there will be just slight tweaks to the amount of acres. But yeah, it's based on a standard set of crop rotation.
Okay, great answer. Lots of business decisions to be made between now and planting next season. So good luck with all of that. And thank you for being with us here today, Scott. We really appreciate our farmers and all the best management practices you're following every year to grow our high quality crop. If you have further questions for Scott or any that we didn't have a chance to get answered, we will follow up with you by email after the webinar. So now let's hear a market outlook for Canadian wheat.
My name is Matilda van Achelen, and I am the Market and Trade Specialist at Cereals Canada. In this presentation, I will give you an overview of the market outlook for the current Canadian crop year. The 2025-2026 Canadian crop year runs from August 1st, 2025 to July 31st, 2026. We will cover supply and demand in the global wheat market, how the Canadian growing season went, and the current forecast for this year's Canadian wheat supply and demand. Let's start with the global wheat market. This graph shows global wheat production in orange and global consumption in gray for the last 10 marketing years. This is based on data from the International Grains Council. We can see that production has grown significantly, but consumption has grown even faster. Globally, wheat production has grown at a rate of about 6.8 million tons per year. This increase in production is mostly driven by improvements in yields. The global area where wheat is grown has fluctuated year by year, but the trend has been mostly flat. Average yields, on the other hand, have been on a sharp upward trend. This reflects innovations in agronomy and crop genetics and the commitment of producers to good farming practices. On the demand side, the growth is even faster, at about 9 million tons per year. Wheat is a staple food around the world, and demand keeps increasing because of global trends like population growth, urbanization, and an expanding middle class. As more and more people live in cities and have busy lifestyles, there is a growing demand for staple foods that are ready to eat or easy to prepare. Wheat is the basis for many convenient staple foods, from bread and pasta to couscous, noodles, crackers, and biscuits. This table shows the global supply and demand data for all wheat for the current marketing year and the last 2 years. Last year, the global wheat harvest reached its second highest level on record, at 800 million tons. At the same time, global consumption reached a new peak at 807 million tons. Because consumption was higher than production, global wheat stocks decreased by the end of the year. We entered the current marketing year with the lowest beginning stocks in 8 years. However, this is expected to be more than offset by a new record level wheat crop of 827 million tons. Many key producers recorded larger harvests this growing season, including Canada, the United States, Russia, and Ukraine. The European Union even had one of its largest crops on record. Meanwhile, Australia and Argentina are also on track for a strong harvest. Because of the large expected production, total wheat supply is forecast to increase by almost 2%. Consumption is expected to increase strongly as well and could reach a new record level of 820 million tons. This is mostly due to the continuing rise in consumption of wheat-based food products, but it is also supported by large supplies. However, consumption would remain at a level below production, allowing ending stocks to expand this year. Let's look at durum wheat separately. Global durum production and consumption tend to fluctuate a bit more, but the long-term trend is steady. Globally, durum is grown in a much smaller area than non-durum wheat. Because of this, global durum production is more sensitive to the impact of local weather in key producing areas. In recent years, durum consumption has often exceeded production, causing a downward trend in global ending stocks. This past marketing year, a large global crop brought some relief from the tightness in the durum market, with production exceeding consumption. Last marketing year, we had a strong global durum crop of 36.4 million tons. Consumption was high as well, but remained below production at 35.7 million tons. Because of this, we entered the current marketing year with larger beginning stocks. This year, the IGC estimates that the global durum crop was the largest in 9 years, reaching 37.2 million tons. This is mostly due to a large increase in production in the European Union. We also saw strong harvests in Canada, the United States, and North Africa. Because of larger beginning stocks in production, total supply is expected to be 3.4% higher than last year. Consumption is forecast to increase slightly compared to last year, reaching 36 million tons. With consumption remaining below the level of production, the IGC expects global stocks to increase going into the next marketing year. On a global scale, Canada accounts for about 3% of total wheat production. Canada's wheat production is fairly small compared to the world's largest producers, like China, the European Union, and India. Our hard-grit spring and durum wheats have lower yields than the winter wheats grown in other parts of the world. Canadian wheat is more of a specialty product on the world market. We account for a significantly larger share of global exports. About 12% of the wheat that is traded globally was grown in Canada. There is a strong demand for the specific quality characteristics of Canadian wheat. In terms of durum wheat, Canada is the second largest producer after the European Union. We account for about 15% of the world's durum production. However, Canada is by far the largest exporter of durum. We supply over half of the durum that is traded on the global market. We grow a lot more durum than what we consume domestically. On average, 91% of the durum wheat grown in Canada is exported. Now let's see where all of this wheat is going. This chart shows our 5-year average exports of non-durum wheat by destination. Overall, about half of our non-durum wheat exports go to Asian countries. China is our largest customer, and Indonesia and Japan usually complete the top 3. We have also seen a strong increase in exports to Latin America over the last decade. Colombia and Peru are our largest customers in the region, and together they make up about half of the Latin American market for Canadian non-durum wheat. Canadian wheat is known for its consistency and high quality. It can be used for many different applications, depending on the needs of each market. Canada Western Red Spring Wheat, or CWRS, is known around the world for its high protein levels, and is considered a premium wheat for processing into bread and other baked goods. For example, Japan is a very quality-conscious customer that primarily purchases Grade 1 CWRS for processing into high-end breads. CWRS is also used as an improver wheat that is blended with lower protein wheat from other origins. For example, in Bangladesh or Nigeria, millers blend CWRS with wheat from Europe or Russia to benefit from the gluten strength of CWRS while reducing overall production costs. Even a market like the United States, which produces more wheat than Canada, imports Canadian wheat for blending to get the desired processing qualities for their end products. The gluten quality of Canadian wheat is complementary to hard-grit spring wheat from the United States. Canadian durum wheat is exported to all major durum-consuming countries in the world. Our main customers are located in the Mediterranean region, where pasta and couscous are staple foods. Canadian durum is especially valued in North African countries for couscous production because of its bright yellow color. In most other countries on the chart, durum is primarily processed into pasta. Italy is a large pasta producer and uses Canadian durum to blend with European durum and durum from other origins. The United States is also a large pasta producer, and they import Canadian durum to supplement their own durum production. Japan prefers Canadian durum for high-quality specialty pasta. Nigeria uses durum to blend with common wheat for pasta production. Peru is one of the largest pasta consumers in Latin America and remains our largest customer in the region. Now that we've situated Canada in the global context, let's move on to an overview of this year's Canadian growing season. This map shows where non-durum wheat is grown in Canada. The Prairie provinces produce the bulk of our non-durum wheat, and about 10% is grown in eastern Canada. On average, over 90% of the non-durum wheat we produce is spring wheat. This is mostly grown in western Canada. Eastern Canada specializes in the production of soft winter wheat, which is planted in the fall and harvested the following summer. Production of durum wheat is concentrated on the prairies. Saskatchewan produces 81% of Canadian durum, and the remaining 19% is grown in Alberta. This visual shows a typical growing season for spring wheat and durum wheat in Western Canada. Producers can typically start planting around the end of April or early May, once the snow has melted. The crops grow throughout the summer months, and harvest can start as early as mid-August, depending on the weather. Harvest is usually complete across the prairies by early to mid-October. Winter wheat, which is mostly grown in Ontario, follows a different schedule. As you can see on this timeline, Ontario's winter wheat crop is typically planted in September and October. Following planting and establishment in the fall, the wheat crop pauses its growth over the cold winter months. When spring warmth returns, the wheat wakes up and starts growing quickly again. By early to mid-summer, around July, the wheat is ready for harvest. And when we reach October, planting has started for the next year. Let's look back at the beginning of the growing season. This chart shows the estimated seeded area by crop with data from Statistics Canada, our national statistics agency. When seeding was complete in June, Statistics Canada surveyed farmers to ask them about the areas they seeded by crop. Usually, there are small fluctuations in the area seeded to each crop year over year. It's important to keep in mind that Canadian farmers choose which crops they grow, and they typically grow different crops in rotations. Farmers decide what to plant based on the characteristics of their land, their local environment, and what they expect will be profitable. Despite these minor fluctuations, wheat is consistently the largest field crop grown in Canada. This reflects a strong demand for Canadian wheat on the global market. Based on this estimate, Canadian farmers planted nearly 8.3 million hectares of non-durum wheat this year, which is similar to last year. Most of this area consisted of spring wheat, and a smaller part was planted with winter wheat. Winter wheat is grown both on the prairies and in eastern Canada. The main class of winter wheat that is available for export is Canada Eastern Soft Red Winter Wheat, or CESRW, which is grown mostly in Ontario. This year, Ontario had an extended planting window that allowed for a larger seeded area. Ontario farmers seeded about 443,000 hectares of CESRW, nearly 18% more than last year and significantly more than average. In terms of durum wheat, the Canadian seeded area increased by 2.6% to over 2.6 million hectares. In addition to the seeded area, the weather plays an important role in the forecast for production. In June and July, which is an important period for the development of spring wheat, precipitation was variable across the prairies. Large parts of central Alberta and western Saskatchewan received average or above average volumes of rainfall. These are the green and blue areas on the map. Other areas, like northern Alberta and Manitoba, received lower than average levels of rainfall. These are the yellow, orange, and red areas. Overall, there was more rain in July than in June, and in many regions, crop conditions improved over the course of the summer. Especially during the last 2 weeks of July, there was significant rainfall along the southern border of the growing region. This was beneficial for grain filling and crop conditions, especially in later seeded crops. The Canadian crop is not irrigated and relies on rainfall. Fortunately, even smaller amounts of rain received at the right times can set the crop up for success because of improvements in crop genetics and agronomic practices. During the month of July, we experienced slightly lower than average temperatures across the prairies. This also helped to mitigate the impact of dry conditions in those areas that received less rainfall. This visual shows the progress of the spring wheat harvest by province for this year and the last 2 years. In 2025, which is the dark blue line on the charts, harvest started out slower due to widespread rainfall in August. The pace picked up with drier weather in September, especially in the western half of the growing region. Despite delays in many regions, The harvest of spring wheat and durum wheat was virtually complete in early October, in line with recent years. Now let's shift our focus to the growing season for southern Ontario, where most of Canada's soft red winter wheat is grown. We already saw that Ontario had a larger seeded area this year. Farmers seeded winter wheat within the ideal planting window in the fall of 2024, and timely rains helped the crop establish. Winter survival was high because of a good snow cover and no problematic freeze-thaw cycles. In the 2 months leading up to harvest, which is a critical time for crop development, the region received average rainfall. The area then experienced a favorable harvest season with an extended window of dry weather that allowed producers to harvest quickly with strong quality. In this next section, we will look at the current forecast for Canadian wheat production. In September, Statistics Canada released a production forecast based on seeded areas and current yield estimates. The 2025 wheat crop is expected to reach over 36.6 million tons, which would be a 2% increase from last year and 13% higher than the 5-year average. This increase in production is due to a larger seeded area and higher expected yields. Non-durum wheat production is forecast at 30.1 million tons, a 1.9% increase from last year. Production of spring wheat is expected to remain steady at 26.6 million tons. Production of winter wheat is expected to increase. This is largely due to a strong production forecast for CESRW in Ontario. Good weather conditions throughout the growing season resulted in strong yields. The Ontario CESRW crop is estimated at 2.6 million tons, nearly 14% higher than last year. Production of durum wheat in Western Canada is forecast to increase by 2.4% to reach 6.5 million tons. This year's wheat production is expected to be higher thanks to larger seeded areas and higher yields. The long-term yield trend for wheat speaks to the resilience of Canadian production. Despite dips in years with dry conditions, such as 2021 and 2023, there has been an upward trend in Canadian wheat yields over the last decades, thanks to innovations in crop genetics and agricultural practices. This chart shows the breakdown of Canadian wheat production by class in 2024. According to last year's production estimate, 62% of the Canadian wheat crop consisted of Canada Western Red Spring Wheat, or CWRS. The second largest wheat class was Canada Western Amber Durum Wheat, or CWAD, accounting for 18% of the crop. You will learn more about wheat classes and their quality characteristics in Elaine's presentation later in this webinar. This year's production estimates by class are scheduled to be released on December 4th. In the last section of this presentation, we will go through the forecast for Canadian supply and demand for this current crop year. This is the most recent supply and disposition forecast published by Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, our government Department of Agriculture. It shows the forecast for the current crop year compared to the previous crop year. For non-durum wheat, total supply is expected to be slightly lower than last year. Although our production increased, this was offset by lower beginning stocks. Domestic use is expected to reach 7.5 million tons, which is slightly higher than last year and in line with average levels. Exports are forecast at 22.3 million tons, which is higher than average. This export volume would be lower than last year, but we need to keep in mind that last year was a record year for non-durum wheat exports. Global demand for high-quality, high-protein wheat remains high, supporting another year of strong exports. Let's move on to durum wheat. Total supply is expected to remain stable compared to last year. Beginning stocks were lower, but production increased. Domestic use is expected to remain steady. Exports are forecast to be higher than average at 5.1 million tons. This would be about 700,000 tons less than last year. Import demand is expected to be somewhat lower this year because of larger domestic durum production in key consuming regions like Europe and North Africa. At Cereals Canada, we keep a close eye on the development of the crop throughout the growing season, from the start of seeding to the end of harvest. Every other week, we update the crop report summaries on our website to give you up-to-date information on how the crop is progressing. As harvest is complete, we would like to invite you to tune in next spring to follow the development of the 2026 crop. That concludes my presentation. Thank you for your attention.
As a reminder to our audience, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen to submit your questions. We have had some questions come in, Matilda, while you were presenting. I'm going to just address one right away, and that is a question about if there's a copy of the presentations available. And yes, we will be posting those on our website once everything has been completed. With the webinars, we will be notifying anyone who has registered of the availability of those presentations once they are posted. So Matilda, let's start with a question regarding Mexico. Do you foresee railing significant amounts of wheat from Ontario to Mexico in the future? So far, the comment is that the only option has been shipping.
Thank you so much for that question, Lisa. It's always very interesting to see what's on our customers' minds and what they are looking for. So in terms of transporting wheat to Mexico, it is absolutely possible to transport wheat by rail. And I would say I'd recommend to take this question to your Canadian exporter because they will have the most comprehensive and the most up-to-date information on what is available to you in terms of modes of transportation and shipping routes.
Excellent. Thank you. The next question is, how likely is it that we will see a number higher than 6.5 million tons for CWAD when Stats Canada publishes their estimate on December the 4th?
That is a good question that I would also very much like to know the answer to. I think I'm in the same boat as the person asking the question, just very curious about those numbers that are going to come out on December 4th. At this point, I'm afraid I don't have any additional information that could inform the answer to this question. The current estimate that we have from Statistics Canada essentially takes two things into account: the seeded area and the current estimates for yield. And that information is currently publicly available, but I don't have any updated insights on this at this point. So I'm also very curious for December 4th.
Okay, well, we will be watching for that. And when we are in market, we will be reporting those updated statistics. Okay, and maybe I'll just end off with one last question. Global demand for wheat seems to be still very strong. Do you expect Canada's wheat area to increase in the future?
Right. Very interesting question as well. And I think to answer this, I should give you some context on Canada's arable land, just to start with. As I'm sure you know, Canada is a very large country. We have a great diversity in climates and also in landscapes. So there are, in fact, large parts of the country that are not suitable for crop cultivation. And we have limited opportunity to expand the area that is suitable. So just to give you an example of that, Canada's northern regions have very cold temperatures and also very short growing seasons. And then meanwhile, in eastern Canada, we have a large area that's called the Canadian Shield. And this area has very rocky soil that is not suitable to grow crops. Now, we have seen that the total area for crop cultivation has remained fairly steady. There's not a lot of room for expansion in that. But at the same time, we do know that there are yearly fluctuations in the areas that are seeded to specific crops. And we also actually had Scott touching on that earlier. A lot of farmers grow their crops in rotations, and a lot of farmers also have established rotations, as Scott mentioned earlier. So there are ultimately minor fluctuations year over year. But that said, farmers can decide to favor certain crops that they think will be profitable in the upcoming year. And we have seen in my presentation that wheat is consistently the largest field crop grown in Canada. So that really reflects the importance of wheat to our Canadian farmers, both in terms of economics and agronomics. And we expect that that will remain the case.
Thanks, Matilda. And thank you for sharing your knowledge with us today. If your question did not get answered, or if you have later in the webinar a question, please still put it in the Q&A. And of course, Cereals Canada is always here to assist, so contact us anytime. We will follow up with you by email, and any questions from the webinar, we will get to that in the coming weeks. So thank you, Matilda.
Thank you for having me, Lisa.
Hi, my name is Derek Bankowski. I am the Chief Grain Inspector for Canada at the Canadian Grain Commission. I am located at our head office in Winnipeg. I will be presenting on the Canadian Grain Commission new crop results and how Canadian wheat performed this year. Following the technical presentations, I will be on the panel available to take your questions. I'm happy to now present the 2025 Western Canadian Wheat Crop Quality Report. Today I'm going to speak to you about our organization, the Canadian Grain Commission, and our core responsibilities. I'll touch on our harvest sample program and provide information on major wheat classes and varieties, grading factors and protein levels in this year's crop. The Canadian Grain Commission regulates grain handling in Canada and establishes and maintains science-based standards of quality for Canadian grain. Our research, programs, and services help support Canada's reputation as a consistent and reliable source of high-quality grain. The Canadian Grain Commission works to deliver grain quality and quantity assurance programs for exports of Canadian grain, carry out scientific research to understand all aspects of grain quality and grain safety, establish and maintain Canada's science-based grain grading system, and to ensure producers receive fair compensation for their grain deliveries. The Harvest Sample Program is a long-standing program at the Canadian Grain Commission. It's been going on for over 100 years now. The CGC receives harvest samples directly from grain producers through this voluntary program. Producers receive a grade and quality information at no cost to them. The CGC uses the samples to assemble quality reports and to conduct research on grain quality and grain safety issues. This research not only ensures that grading factor tolerances reflect their impact on end-use functionality, but it also helps to make sure grading factors continue to reflect processing needs and to protect Canada's reputation as a reliable source of high-quality grain. The crop quality data, which will be presented to you shortly, is a product of these samples submitted to our Harvest Sample Program. This quality data confirms Canada's ability to deliver consistent, high-quality grain from year to year. Now I'll share the statistics with you from the 2025 crop so far. We have graded just under 5,000 samples as of today, including 2,150 samples of wheat and durum. Typically, in a full year, we will receive around 10,000 samples across the 17 different grain types, including cereals, oilseeds, and pulses. We are still receiving samples daily, and we will continue to until we receive approximately 10,000. The first class I'll speak to you about is Canada Western Red Spring. This is by far the most predominant class of wheat grown and exported from Canada. When we look at the Canada Western Red Spring varieties that were grown this year, you will note that AAC Brandon is still the most popular variety being grown. It has approximately 22% of the acreage. 5 years ago, it occupied almost 40% of the acres, so there has been a steady downward trend in acreage of AAC Brandon. Wheatland, Starbuck, and Viewfield are the next most popular varieties, and you will also note that the newer varieties of Hockley and Hodge are also increasing in popularity with producers and gaining acreage as the acreage of Brandon goes down. When we look at the Canada Western Red Spring grade distribution this year, we have an excellent quality crop. 73% of the samples are grading number 1, 17% number 2, which gives us 90% of this year's crop grading in the top 2 grades. This is an excellent quality Canada Western Red Spring crop this year. For the few samples that were downgraded out of number 1 CWRS, the predominant reason for that is hard vitreous kernels, with almost 10% of the downgrades on account of that. We also have a small amount of downgrading on account of severe sprouting, mildew, and frost damage. In terms of protein content in this year's CWRS crop, the Western Canadian average is 13.8%. The 10-year average is 13.8%. So we are right in line with the long-term average for this class and slightly lower than the 14.1% we saw in last year's crop. When we look at the number 1 CWRS protein level, we're seeing an average of 13.8%. That is slightly lower than the 5-year average of 14.1%, which was also the average in last year's crop. When we look at the number 2 Canada Western Red Spring protein, here we're at 13.6%, so it's slightly lower than the number 1 at 13.8. The 5-year average for number 2 is 13.6, so we are right in line with the long-term average on number 2 CWRS protein. Next, I will speak to you about Canada Western Amber Durum. This is the second most predominant class of wheat grown in Western Canada. For the first time in the last 5 years, Transcend is no longer the most popular variety, as we see CDC Defy taking a slight lead this year over Transcend. Both of those varieties occupy approximately 18% of the durum acres in Western Canada. AAC Stronghold continues to gain in popularity, and AAC Weyburn is a new promising variety as well. When we look at the grade distribution for the Amber Durum wheat this year, we are seeing 21% grading number 1, 23% number 2, and 36% number 3. So not nearly as high as what we saw in the Canada Western Red Spring, but there still is a very high amount of durum grading in the top 3 grades. When we look at grading factors, for Canada Western Amber Durum. The most significant grading factor that we're seeing is severe midge damage. We're also seeing some samples being downgraded on account of mildew, severely sprouted, and fusarium damage. In terms of protein levels in the durum wheat crop this year, across all grades, we are seeing an average of 14.7%. The 10-year average is 14.4, so we're about 0.3 higher than the long-term average and about 0.6 higher than what we saw last year when it was at 15.3%. That concludes my presentation on this year's wheat crop quality. Thank you.
Hello and welcome. My name is Elaine Sapunik, and I am the Vice President of Technical Services at Cereals Canada. I'd like to take this time to share our process of preparing the composite samples for the 2025 crop year. New for Cereals Canada this year is our assessment of wheat from Eastern Canada. However, we remain focused on the same objective when preparing our composite samples, which is to prepare, assess, and share data on composite samples of wheat from both Western and Eastern Canada, so that they accurately reflect the export quality of the 2025 wheat crop. In Western Canada, we collaborate with exporters, some of whom you might recognize from their names listed on this slide. Our team has regular discussions with individual exporters as harvest progresses. This gives us insight into harvest progress and any downgrading factors to be aware of. From these discussions, we summarize the quality for each composite sample. We then propose quality expectations for each wheat class and grade or composite sample with each exporter to get their feedback and approval. This ensures that we are able to meet our objectives of preparing composites that reflect export quality. Once we have approval from our collaborators, we prepare our composites. These are then sent to the Canadian Grain Commission, where they are graded using the official grain grading guide according to the export grade determination tables for each wheat class. After the completion of grading, our team then proceeds to mill, analyze, and assess end product quality. After all the quality data has been completed, we have discussions about the quality we have seen. This happens internally with our technical team and also externally with our contacts in the grain and milling industry to see if similar quality observations are also being seen. For 2025, 7 composites were prepared, and these were prepared using samples that we received from our collaborators up until October 16, 2025. As a reminder, these samples were graded according to the expert grade determination tables for both CWRS and CWAD. For CWRS, we prepared 3 composites. For the number 1 CWRS composite, there were Western and Eastern regional composites that were prepared. These are reflective of the transportation logistics for export movement of wheat. These regions are shown in the top map. The Eastern region is the blue shaded area comprised of Manitoba, while the unshaded area represents the Western region, which is Alberta, Saskatchewan, and British Columbia. The number 2 CWRS composite is a prairie composite, which reflects the growing region shown in the bottom map on the right-hand side of this slide. This encompasses Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and British Columbia. Prairie composites were prepared for all 3 CWAD composites. The composite denoted as wheat by specification represents the quality that could be expected in a shipment by specification of a medium protein wheat from Western Canada. The term wheat by specification is not an official wheat class and can sometimes be referred to as CP+, Western Canadian Wheat, or WCW as an abbreviation, or other. Discussions regarding quality expectations for this composite should be held between the exporter or seller and buyer to determine specifications instead of using grade standards. This may result in quality differences between customers. In Eastern Canada, we received samples of Canada Eastern Soft Red Winter, or CESRW, from elevators in Southern Ontario from staff at the Grain Farmers of Ontario. These samples were then sent to Cereals Canada, and staff prepared the composites for this wheat class. The composite sample was graded by the Canadian Grain Commission using the primary grade determination table from the official grain grading guide. After completion of grading, the composite was assessed for milling, analytical, and end product quality. One composite of a number 2 or better, CESRW, was prepared using samples obtained from the regions shown in the highlighted area of this map. I hope this information helps you understand our process for preparing composite samples for both Western and Eastern Canada. The upcoming presentations will focus on the quality of each of these composite samples. Thank you.
A lot goes into growing the best for the world. When it comes to Canadian wheat, it starts with a commitment to quality, latest technology, and generations of know-how. Here in the Canadian West, dedicated farmers throughout Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba sustainably grow the pride of the prairies: Canada Western Red Spring and Canada Prairie Spring Red. It begins with choosing the best disease-resistant seed, and then bringing science and experience to every stage of growth. This helps to ensure Canada's crop meets the world's expectations for quality and consistency year after year. Communicating that quality to the world is the job of the Cereals Canada experts who will mill, analyze, bake, and assess the wheat at every harvest and through the year. Canada Western Red Spring, or CWRS, is a sought-after hard wheat with high protein content and high protein quality, making it an excellent choice for various end products including high-volume pan breads, hearth breads, and noodles. Known around the world as a reliable improver wheat, CWRS can be milled with lower quality wheats to improve the quality of flour and enhance the characteristics of baked goods. Canada Prairie Spring Red, or CPSR, has a high milling yield and bright white flour. Its medium soft kernel makes it ideal for pan breads, flatbreads, crackers, and noodles. Grown throughout the West, Canada Western Red Spring is Canada's largest wheat class, accounting for 80% of Canada's wheat exports. For generations, farming families across the prairies have proudly grown their best for the world. Canada Western Red Spring and Canada Prairie Spring Red. You can see and taste the quality in every grain.
Now, let's hear it from our technical team leads who will be sharing the results for quality and functionality testing of Canada Western Red Spring Wheat.
Hello everyone, and thank you for tuning in to Cereals Canada's New Crop webinar. I will begin with presenting the wheat's quality and milling performance for number 1 Canada Western Red Spring, or CWRS, Western Composite. Test weight is very good this year, which is higher than last year and the 5-year average. Test weights for 1 CWRS were always above 80 kg per hectoliter, which is significantly higher than the minimum test weight requirement of 79 kg per hectoliter. Millers would always look at the test weight to have an idea of the wheat's potential milling extraction. The 1,000 kernel weight of 1 CWRS Western Composite is significantly higher this year, which is one of the highlights of the 2025 new crop. This, in combination with higher test weight, provides an indication of a better CWRS wheat quality this year. Protein content is good this year, even though it is slightly lower than last year and the 5-year average. This makes 1 CWRS Western Composite good for blending with lower protein wheats. Protein content was expressed on 13.5% moisture basis. Some millers are looking at protein content values on dry moisture basis, as other wheat exporters are expressing protein content on different moisture bases. The falling number is good at around 400 seconds, which means that there are no issues with sprouting this year, just like last year. Wheat ash is lower this year, and this was also observed in other CWRS composites. The particle size index, which is telling us the hardness of the kernel, is the same as last year. We are not showing the 5-year average of PSI, and the reason is because we used a different grinder when we tested PSI in previous years. We are presenting two values for milling yields. The first value is on as-is basis, which was calculated based on total products. The second value was corrected to a constant ash basis of 0.5%. In a lab environment, it is better to compare milling extraction on the same ash basis of 0.5%, as extraction is not optimized in these conditions. And because this year we have seen flour ash that is lower compared to last year and the 5-year average, the corrected milling yield at 0.5% ash was excellent at 78.7%. The L-star or brightness value supports the lower flour ash value and is showing slightly higher compared to last year and the 5-year average. We have also prepared flour at 74% extraction to have a better comparison of quality at constant extraction. Here we're also seeing low flour ash content and good L-star or brightness for 1 CWRS Western Composite. Now let us take a look at the wheat quality and milling performance of number 1 Canada Western Red Spring Eastern Composite. We are also seeing very good test weight at 84 kg per hectoliter, which is the same as last year and slightly higher than the 5-year average. The 1,000 kernel weight is higher in 1 CWRS Eastern Composite as well when compared to last year and the 5-year average. The protein content is also good, which will give the millers the opportunity to produce many different flour products at different protein ranges or blend CWRS with lower protein wheats from other sources. We are also seeing good falling number for 1 CWRS Eastern Composite, which is similar to last year and the 5-year average, indicating that we don't have issues with sprouting this year. The wheat ash content is also lower compared to last year and the 5-year average. The particle size index is slightly higher this year for 1 CWRS Eastern Composite, indicating slightly softer kernels compared to last year. We have seen good milling yield on total product basis at 76.2%, which is slightly higher compared to last year and the 5-year average. The corrected milling yield at 0.5% ash is excellent at 79.7%, and this was due to lower flour ash this year. The L-star or brightness is agreeing with lower flour ash value and is slightly higher this year compared to last year and the 5-year average. Flour ash and L-star or brightness are showing better results at 74% compared to last year and the 5-year average. Now we will be looking at the wheat quality and milling performance for number 2 Canada Western Red Spring Prairie Composite. Test weight is very good at 82 kg per hectoliter, which is significantly higher compared to the minimum test weight requirement for number 2 CWRS at 77 kg per hectoliter. Similar to what was observed in 1 CWRS composites, the 1000 kernel weight for the number 2 CWRS is higher compared to last year and the 5-year average. The protein content is good at 13.8%, which makes the number 2 CWRS ideal for blending with lower protein wheats. We are seeing good falling number, which is telling us that we do not have sprouting issues this year. The wheat ash content is lower compared to last year and the 5-year average. The particle size index for this year's number 2 CWRS composite is the same as last year. The milling yield for number 2 CWRS on total product basis is similar to last year and the 5-year average. Milling yield on constant ash basis of 0.5% is excellent and is slightly higher this year compared to last year and similar to the 5-year average. Flour ash is slightly lower than last year and is the same as the 5-year average. We are also seeing similar L-star or brightness this year compared to last year and the 5-year average. At 74% extraction, flour ash is lower this year compared to last year and the 5-year average. L-star or brightness is also slightly higher this year compared to last year and the 5-year average.
Thank you, Norbert. I will now talk about the flour quality of the number 1 Canada Western Red Spring Western Composite. Protein and wet gluten contents are similar compared to last year and slightly lower than the 5-year average with low protein loss. Amylograph peak viscosities are high this year. These values agree with our falling number value and confirm there are no issues with excessive alpha amylase activity. Starch damage was measured using the STmatic and reported in UCD and are similar to last year and the 5-year average. A farinograph is used to assess the water absorption and mixing properties of the flour. This year, the straight grade and 74% composites had water absorptions slightly higher than last year and similar to the 5-year average. We are seeing good stability for both our straight grade composite and 74% extraction flours. Stabilities are slightly shorter this year compared to last year and the 5-year average, but are still good and indicate good gluten strength. The dough development time for both composites are good. The straight grade is slightly shorter than last year and the 5-year average. Mixing tolerance index values are low, indicating a good tolerance to overmixing. The extensograph is used to look at the dough performance, focusing on the strength and extensibility of the dough. This year's analysis of the straight grade composite shows a slight decrease in dough strength with a lower Rmax value compared to the previous crop year. However, it is similar to the 5-year average. A slight decrease in strength was also observed in the 74% extraction composite compared to last year and the 5-year average. Extensibility for both composites are similar to last year and the 5-year average. Another method used to measure dough performance is the avelograph. Good tenacity was observed for both the straight grade and 74% composites, as indicated by the p-values. Both composite samples had short L values compared to last year and the 5-year average, but are within an acceptable range for this class. The P/L ratio is closer to 1 this year, indicating a good balance between strength and extensibility. Overall, we saw good gluten quality in both composites as indicated by the high W values. These values are lower than last year and the 5-year average. We will now look at the flour data for the number 1 Canada Western Red Spring Eastern composite. Similar trends were observed to our number 1 CWRS Western composite. Protein and wet gluten contents are similar compared to last year and slightly lower than the 5-year average with low protein loss. Amylograph peak viscosities are high this year. These values agree with our falling number value and confirm there are no issues with excessive alpha amylase activity. Starch damage values reported as UCD are similar to last year and the 5-year average. Freenograph water absorptions are similar to last year and the 5-year average for both the straight grade and 74% extraction composites. The straight grade composite had similar stability to last year and slightly lower compared to the 5-year average. The 74% extraction composite had a longer stability compared to last year but similar to the 5-year average. The dough development time was slightly longer for the straight grade composite compared to last year, but similar to the 5-year average. The 74% extraction composite had similar dough development time compared to last year and the 5-year average. Mixing tolerance index values are low, indicating a good tolerance to overmixing. The extensograph data for the number 1 Eastern composite shows an increase in strength for both the straight grade and 74% extraction composites compared to last year and the 5-year average. The extensibilities are comparable to last year and the 5-year average for both composites. For the avelograph data, the number 1 CWRS Eastern composite had similar trends to the number 1 CWRS Western composite. Good tenacity was observed for both the straight grade and 74% extraction composites, as indicated by the p-values. We saw shorter L values for both composites, but still within the acceptable range for this class. The P/L ratio is close to 1, indicating a good balance between strength and extensibility. We saw strong gluten quality in both composites as indicated by the high W values, although these values are lower than last year and the 5-year average. Like last year, the average 74% extraction composite values represent a 4-year average. In 2022, we only produced a straight grade flour. Looking at the quality data for the number 2 CWRS composite, the protein content is similar to last year and the 5-year average with low protein loss. Similar wet gluten contents were observed for both composites compared to last year and the 5-year average. We see lower amylograph peak viscosities this year compared to last year, but similar to the 5-year average. These values are still good and indicate minimal alpha amylase activity. Starch damage reported as UCD are good and similar to last year and the 5-year average. Both the straight grade and the 74% extraction composites have freenograph absorptions the same or similar as last year and the 5-year average. These values are still within the acceptable range for CWRS. Decreased stabilities were observed for both the straight grade and 74% extraction composites compared to last year and the 5-year average. Dough development time was slightly shorter for the straight grade and the 74% extraction composites compared to the previous year and similar to the 5-year average. Mixing tolerance index values are low, indicating a good tolerance to overmixing. This year's analysis of the straight grade and 74% extraction composites show a decrease in dough strength with a lower Rmax value compared to the previous crop. Increased extensibility was seen for both composite samples compared to last year and are similar to the 5-year average. The number 2 CWRS composite has similar avail graph trends to the number 1 CWRS composites. We see comparable P values to the previous crop year and 5-year average for both the straight grade and the 74% extraction composites, indicating good tenacity. L values are lower this year compared to last year, but are similar to the 5-year average. The P over L values are good, indicating a good balance of strength and extensibility. Although the W values are lower than last year and the 5-year average, they still indicate good overall gluten strength in the composites. Lindsay will now discuss the processing quality CWRS composite.
Thanks, Christina. To assess the baking quality of the number 1 Western Canada Western Red Spring composite, we baked it using both a no-time dough and sponge and dough baking process. Baking absorption increased slightly by 1% compared to last year for both of these baking processes. A lower mixing time was observed for no-time dough compared to last year and the 5-year average, while mixing time remained the same for the sponge and dough process. Dough handling properties were classified as strong to moderate for both baking processes, and the dough exhibited similar extensibility compared to last year. When we perform the shock test, which we do to simulate the mechanical abuse the dough may encounter as it moves through the baking process in a large-scale or industrial-size bakery, the no-time dough sample exhibited no collapsing, while the sponge and dough had minor collapsing, but with excellent recovery in the oven. This is an indication that both samples had excellent fermentation tolerance. Specific volume is an important quality characteristic of pan bread. This year, specific volume of the bread using the no-time dough process was slightly lower and slightly higher for the sponge and dough process compared to last year. Although there were some variation, specific volume was still very good for both baking processes. Total bread score, which is based on subjective scoring of both external and internal bread characteristics, was also excellent for both baking processes. External scoring showed that there was some roughness of the crust for the no-time dough process and a smaller break in shred for the sponge and dough process. Crumb structure, which also includes the evaluation of specific cell characteristics, was good for both baking processes and comparable to last year. The bread baked from both processes received top scores for cell size and distribution, while it was noted that both had a slightly open crumb structure this year. Based on Minolta L-star values, both baking processes produced bread with a crumb color comparable to last year and to the 5-year average. During subjective scoring, it was noted that the bread produced from the no-time dough process had creamy tones. For the number 1 Canada Western Red Spring Western composite, fresh yellow alkaline noodles and white salted noodles were produced using flours that were milled to both a 74% and 60% extraction. When we talk about color for fresh yellow alkaline noodles, we're focusing on L-star values, which measure noodle brightness, and B-star values, which is an indication of yellowness. The fresh yellow alkaline noodles at 74% extraction exhibited very good color properties that were comparable to last year, as well as the 5-year average. Textural properties, or more specifically noodle firmness, is referred to as maximum cutting stress. Despite having a similar protein content as last year, maximum cutting stress was lower this year compared to last year, but still good and within the acceptable range for this wheat class. For fresh white salted noodles, we pay close attention to the L-star values, which are a measure of lightness, which is perceived as brightness. This composite produced noodles with a desirable bright appearance. L-star values were slightly higher than last year and higher than the 5-year average. Color retention was also good, which is important as it's a key indicator of noodle freshness for consumers. The number 1 Canada Western Red Spring Western Composite at 74% extraction produced noodles with excellent texture or biting quality that was comparable to last year and to the 5-year average. Here are the baking parameters for the number 1 Canada Western Red Spring Eastern Composite for both the no-time dough and sponge and dough baking processes. Baking absorption increased by 1% for both processes compared to what we saw last year. Mixing time decreased slightly for no-time dough compared to last year and the 5-year average, and increased slightly for the sponge and dough process. For no-time dough, dough handling properties were classified as strong, but the dough was slightly more extensible than what was observed in 2024. The sample exhibited good fermentation tolerance as there were no signs of collapsing when the sample was shocked. For sponge and dough, dough handling properties were classified as strong to moderate, and compared to the 2024 sample, exhibited slightly more extensibility. When shocked, there was noticeable collapsing of the dough, but it had good recovery in the oven, indicating good fermentation tolerance. The no-time dough baking process produced bread with an excellent specific volume, which was higher than last year and higher than the 5-year average. The sponge and dough process produced bread with a very good specific volume, the same as last year and comparable to the 5-year average. Total bread score was excellent for both baking processes. Bread produced using the no-time dough process received perfect scores for external characteristics, while the bread produced using the sponge and dough process received reduced scores on account of a slightly unsymmetrical loaf, some roughness on the crust, and a slightly smaller break-in shred. Here we have images to show the crumb structure for both baking processes. In the no-time dough process, top scores were given for specific cell characteristics, such as distribution, shape, and size. The sponge and dough process also produced bread with top scores in crumb structure, cell distribution, and cell size. When evaluating crumb color, Minolta L-star values were comparable to last year for the no-time dough process and higher for the sponge and dough process. Subjective scoring also noted that this composite produced a bright white crumb for both baking processes. For the Canada Western Red Spring No. 1 Eastern Composite, noodles were made with flour milled to a 74% extraction. For the fresh yellow alkaline noodles, there was an increase in L-star and B-star values compared to last year, and they are slightly higher than the 5-year average. Along with improved color, these noodles also exhibited very good color retention. Maximum cutting stress was comparable to last year as well as to the 5-year average. For fresh white salted noodles, the Canada Western Red Spring Eastern Composite produced noodles with higher L-star values compared to last year and higher than the 5-year average. In addition to the increased brightness, Color retention properties for this composite were good and comparable to last year. Maximum cutting stress was comparable to last year and to the 5-year average. Here are the baking parameters for the number 2 Canada Western Red Spring Prairie composite. Just like we saw in the number 1 Canada Western Red Spring composites, baking absorption increased by 1% for both baking processes. We also saw mixing time decrease for no-time dough and increase slightly for sponge and dough compared to last year and to the 5-year average. Both processes had strong to moderate dough handling properties. Extensibility was similar to what was observed in 2024, and when shocked, the dough from both baking processes showed minor collapsing with excellent recovery in the oven. Specific volume was excellent when using the no-time dough process and very good for sponge and dough. Both baking processes produced bread with excellent total bread scores that were comparable to last year. When evaluating external characteristics, both samples received slightly lower scores for break and shred. The 2025 number 2 Canada Western Red Spring composite produced bread with a good crumb structure regardless of the baking process. Internal scoring showed that bread produced using the no-time dough process had a slightly open crumb structure with some round and large cells. The sponge and dough process produced bread with a slightly closed crumb structure, but received perfect scores for other cell properties. In both baking processes, the L-star values were comparable to last year and to the 5-year average. Subjective scoring also indicated that this composite produced bread with a very bright white crumb. For noodles, the number 2 Canada Western Red Spring composite was milled to 74% extraction and used to process both fresh yellow alkaline and fresh white salted noodles. The fresh yellow alkaline noodles had good color. Both the L-star and B-star values, which are especially important for this noodle type, were comparable to last year and to the 4-year average. Maximum cutting stress was lower than last year, but comparable to the 4-year average and what we would expect from this wheat class. Although slightly lower than last year, L-star values indicate that the fresh white salted noodles produced from the number 2 Canada Western Red Spring composite had a bright appearance that were comparable to the 4-year average. Color retention properties were acceptable and within the expectations for this wheat class. Maximum cutting stress was slightly lower than last year, but comparable to the 4-year average. These results are within expectations for the CWRS wheat class and for this noodle type. Overall, the 2025 Canada Western Red Spring crop has demonstrated consistent quality which Canadian wheat is known for. This year, Canada Western Red Spring has high test weights and excellent thousand kernel weight, which in turn has resulted in good milling yields. Flour quality results show good stability and a balance of strength and extensibility. This has resulted in the production of very good quality bread and good color and texture in both fresh yellow alkaline and fresh white salted noodles.
It takes a special kind of care to grow a special kind of grain. It's here, in the hands of highly skilled farmers, that Canada's durum wheat comes to life. Because even in a country as big as Canada, where grains are grown from coast to coast, only a small portion of that farmland is right for growing some of the world's best durum, Canada Western Amber Durum. Here, you will find just the right soil conditions and just the right climate for durum to thrive. In fact, nearly half of the world's durum exports come from this part of Canada, proudly produced by farming families who have grown durum sustainably for generations. These farmers have the pride and know-how to grow durum, renowned for its cleanliness, excellent milling characteristics, bright yellow color, high protein content, and semolina yield that feeds families around the globe. That's the special kind of care it takes to grow a special kind of grain. Canada Western Amber Durum, growing our best for the world.
The team will now share the quality and functionality results for Canada Western Amber Durum wheat.
Hello everyone. Again, thank you for taking your time to tune in to our new crop webinar. I will be presenting the wheat quality and milling performance data for Canada Western Amber Durum or CWAD new crop. This year, we are providing information for number 1, number 2, and number 3 CWAD composites. We are seeing good test weights for all composites, which are all higher than 80 kg per hectoliter. The 1,000 kernel weights are higher in all grades this year compared to last year and the 5-year average. The HVK or hard vitreous kernels on all composites are good and are significantly higher than the minimum requirements for number 1, number 2, and number 3 CWAD composites at 80%, 60%, and 40% respectively. High HVK has an impact in CWAD's milling characteristics as it helps the millers produce coarser semolina with consistent particle size and less residual flour. The protein contents are good, which are all above 14%. These values were corrected to 13.5% moisture basis. Samples of number 2 and number 3 CWAD composites have certain percentage of sprouted kernels which are reflected in decreasing falling number values. However, high alpha amylase activity has a less significant effect on pasta processing than it does on bread baking. Wheat ash contents for all CWAD composites are typical for the class. The particle size index values of number 1 and number 2 CWAD composites are higher this year, indicating slightly softer kernels compared to last year. We are seeing higher semolina milling yields this year compared to last year, and this could be due to good test weights and higher 1,000 kernel weights. The semolina ash contents are also lower in all composites compared to last year and the 5-year average. We have observed higher spec counts this year. This could be the impact of the downgrades like sprouted kernels and severe midge this year. The other factor that could have contributed to higher spec counts this year is the bigger kernel size of the composites, which were milled in a fixed roll gap setting, resulting to more aggressive grinding. This can be managed by monitoring break releases in your commercial mills. Next, let us hear the CWAD's analytical data from my colleague Christina.
Thank you, Norbert. Now we will look at the semolina quality from the Canada Western Amber Durum composites. All 3 composites have high protein and wet gluten contents. High protein content is important for producing high-quality pasta, couscous, or other semolina-based foods. It can also be blended to improve the overall protein content and quality in lower protein durum. While lower than last year, the gluten index values are still within the range expected for this class. Canadian durum wheat is known for its ability to produce bright yellow semolina, a key characteristic highly valued by industry. In the current year's crop assessment, all three composites have demonstrated yellow pigment levels and B-star values slightly lower than the previous year and the 5-year average. However, these values are still good and will produce end products with good yellow color. The Avila graph is used to evaluate the gluten characteristics of the semolina. All three composites have good tenacity, as indicated by the p-value, and are similar to last year and the 5-year average. We see slightly less extensibility this year in our composites compared to last year. However, they are similar to the 5-year average. P over L is similar for all three composites, indicating a good balance between strength and extensibility. Although the W values are lower for all three composites this year, they are within an acceptable range, indicating the composites have sufficient gluten strength for processing and producing high-quality end products. The balanced gluten properties of Canadian durum allow it to be used in a wide range of end products. These properties provide the strength required for shape retention and cooking quality in dried pasta, the extensibility needed for fresh pasta, proper hydration for couscous, and contributes to the structure and texture of durum bread products. Lindsay is next to share the pasta results.
Thank you, Christina. For the number 1 Canada Western Amber Durum composite, the B-star value, which again is an indication of yellowness, and L-star value, an indication of brightness, were very good and comparable to the number 1 composite from last year, as well as to the 5-year average. The A-star was slightly higher than last year, as well as the 5-year average. Although there was a slight increase in A-star values compared to last year, overall, the number 1 Canada Western Amber Durum composite produced pasta with very good color attributes. For the number 2 and number 3 composites, we did see reduced L-star and B-star values, as well as increased A-star values compared to what we saw last year and compared to the 5-year average for the number 2 composite. The changes in color, specifically the decrease in pasta yellowness and brightness, are consistent with the downgrading factors observed in these two composites. Here are the firmness and cooking loss results for all three 2025 Canada Western Amber Durum composites. There are some variations in texture, but all spaghetti firmness values are good and typical for Canada Western Amber Durum, as indicated by the 5-year averages for both the number 1 and number 2 composites. Although there's not a 5-year average comparison for the number 3 composite, as we don't always have this grade available for export, the firmness values are still good and are within the expectation for this wheat class. As Christina previously mentioned, the 2025 Canada Western Amber Durum composites all have good quality protein with balanced gluten properties, which resulted in excellent cooking quality as indicated by the cooking loss. Cooking losses were lower than last year and demonstrate the spaghetti's ability to maintain structural integrity during cooking. In summary, the 2025 Canada Western Amber Durum crop has a high 1,000 kernel weight, which resulted in good milling yields. The semolina boasts a low ash content and balanced gluten properties, resulting in pasta with good texture and excellent cooking quality.
The team will now share the quality and functionality results for wheat by specification. This wheat composite represents the quality that could be expected in a shipment by specification of a medium protein wheat from Western Canada. The term wheat by specification is not an official wheat class and can sometimes be referred to as CP+, Western Canadian wheat,
or other.
Hello everyone, thank you for taking the time to tune in to 2025 Cereals Canada New Crop Webinar. Today I will be presenting the wheat quality and milling performance data for wheat by specification composite. As explained by Elaine, the composite denoted as wheat by specification represents the quality that could be expected in a shipment by specification of a medium protein wheat from Western Canada. For reference, each quality and milling performance data are presented alongside the results for 100% CPSR from last year and the 5-year average. Test weight and 1000 kernel weight are both very good for this composite, indicating potential for good milling performance. The protein content at 12.9% is what we would expect for a medium protein wheat. The falling number is good, indicating that we don't have issues with sprouting in this composite. Wheat ash content is also good, which is lower than 1.5%. The particle size index at 57% is indicating that this wheat is slightly softer, which is also what we are expecting for a medium protein wheat. The milling yield on as-is or total product basis is good, and because the flour ash content for this composite is low, the corrected milling yield at 0.5% constant ash basis is excellent at 78.4%. L-star or brightness is close to 85, indicating a good value for flour brightness. The flour prepared at 74% extraction is showing low flour ash and good L-star or brightness value. Now let's hear the flour quality data from my colleague Christina.
Thank you, Norbert. We will now look at the wheat by specification flour quality. Protein content and loss are good for both the straight grade and 74% extraction flours. Wet gluten contents are good and are what we would expect for a medium protein wheat. Amylograph peak viscosities are good. This matches the falling number value, indicating the sample is sound and has low alpha amylase activity. Starch damage values are consistent with what would be expected for a medium protein wheat. The Farinograph is used to evaluate the water absorption and mixing properties of the flour. The composite has good water absorption for both the straight grade and 74% extraction flours. An absorption around 60% is considered high for a medium protein wheat. The other Farinograph parameters show this sample has good gluten strength and tolerance to overmixing. The extensograph is an instrument used to assess the strength and extensibility of the dough. This data will provide information on how the dough will perform during processing and end product quality. The straight grade and 74% extraction flours have high Rmax values, indicating good gluten strength. The extensibility is acceptable for both extractions and within the range expected for a medium protein wheat. Both extractions have good tenacity and extensibility, resulting in balanced gluten properties as indicated by the P/L ratio. A high W value indicates good overall processing quality. You will now hear from Lindsay as she shares results from baking and noodles.
Thanks, Christina. Here are the baking parameters for the wheat by specification composite. This composite had a high baking absorption of 66%, which is highly desirable for bakers. For the no-time dough process, mixing time was 6.8 minutes and 8 minutes for the sponge and dough process. Dough handling properties were classified as strong to moderate for both baking processes. In the no-time dough process, there was minor stickiness during processing and minor tearing during sheeting and molding. In this process, the dough demonstrated high extensibility. When the shock test was performed, there was minor collapsing with good recovery in the oven. In the sponge and dough process, the dough exhibited minor stickiness during processing and moderate to high extensibility. When shocked, there was noticeable collapsing with excellent recovery in the oven, indicating good fermentation tolerance. Bread produced from the wheat by specification composite had very good specific volume for both baking processes. Total bread score for the bread produced using the no-time dough process was good. For external characteristics, the bread received top scores with the exception of a slightly smaller break and shred. In the sponge and dough process, the total bread score was excellent, and similarly to the no-time dough process, a slightly small break and shred was noted. Both baking processes produce bread with a good crumb structure. For the no-time dough process, the cell structure was slightly open with some large round cells. In sponge and dough, the cell structure was noted as being slightly closed, but otherwise received top scores for all cell characteristics. Both processes produce bread with a very good crumb color, as indicated by Minolta L-star values. This was further supported during subjective scoring, where it was noted that both processes produce bread with a white crumb. Fresh white salted noodles were processed using the wheat by specification composite milled to a 74% extraction. These noodles had a bright color as indicated by high L-star values. This composite also produced noodles with good color retention properties. This composite produced noodles with a firm texture as indicated by the maximum cutting stress values. This wheat by specification composite, which reflects a medium protein wheat, showed good test weight and milling yield, good gluten strength, and when processed into end products, produced very good quality bread and noodles with good color and color retention properties.
The team will now share the quality and functionality results for Canada Eastern Soft Red Winter Wheat.
Hello everyone, thank you for taking the time to join us for today's webinar. I'd first like to begin by noting that the data that you will be seeing has been generated by two different laboratories, and this could be a factor in some of the differences that are being observed. Different labs can use different methods, contributing to variations in reproducibility. And even within a lab, there can be variations in repeatability, especially for some tests. This includes data generated in 2025 by Cereals Canada and data generated in 2024 by SGS in Guelph, Ontario. Cereals Canada completed a comparison on an identical 2024 harvest composite wheat sample of Canada Eastern Soft Red Winter or CESRW and found that the majority of differences between the two labs were minimal. The exception to this is higher milling yield and lower flour ash and some farinograph and alveograph values and greater cookie spread factor on account of greater cookie width at Cereals Canada. And now I will be presenting the wheat quality and milling performance data for number 2 or better Canada Eastern Soft Red Winter or CESRW. We are seeing good test weight, which is higher than the minimum requirement for the class and is the same as last year. We have also seen good 1,000 kernel weight, which is similar to last year as well. The protein content, which was reported on 13.5% moisture basis, is slightly higher this year compared to last year. The falling number value is good, which indicates that we don't have sprouting issues this year. The wheat ash, although higher than last year, is typical of the class. Particle size index, or PSI, which is an indication of the hardness of the kernels, is showing similar value this year compared to last year. Higher milling yield was observed this year, but this could be attributed to a different lab mill that was used this year. In addition to higher milling yield on as-is or total product basis, lower flour ash content was observed, and this has resulted in an excellent milling yield when corrected to constant ash basis of 0.5%. The L star or brightness supports the low flour ash value and is higher by 1 unit this year. Now let us hear the flour quality data from my colleague Christina.
Thank you, Norbert. Now we will look at the Canada Eastern Soft Red Winter Composite Flour Quality. This year, the composite has slightly higher protein content, while the wet gluten content was similar to last year. Both the millilograph peak viscosity and the falling number results were high, indicating sound wheat with low alpha amylase activity. Starch damage measured using the STmatic and reported in UCD fell within the expected range for soft wheat. The solvent retention capacity, or SRC, provides an indication of different functional properties in the flour which relate to baking quality. Sucrose, which provides an indication of pentosand content, and sodium carbonate, which provides an indication of starch damage, are slightly lower this year, while water and lactic acid are similar to last year. Lactic acid SRC values are important because they provide an indication of gluten strength. The value of 99 is comparable to last year and is typical for this class. The Farinagraph is used to evaluate the water absorption and mixing properties of the flour. Lower Farinagraph absorption, dough development time, DDT, and stability values were seen this year. This could be due to mill and equipment changes. These values are still within the range of what is expected for this class. The Avilograph provides an indication of gluten strength related to elasticity and extensibility. This year, the composite showed good gluten properties typical of the CESRW class. We saw a longer L value than in 2024, indicating a slightly more extensible sample this year. You will now hear from Lindsay as she shares the cookie quality results.
Thanks, Christina. Canada Eastern Soft Red Winter Wheat is used in many different finished product applications, and results from the cookie test are important indicators of quality and functionality. This year, the Canada Eastern Soft Red Winter Composite produced cookies exhibiting slightly increased widths and reduced thickness compared to last year. This resulted in an increased width over thickness ratio and cookie spread factor, which is typical of good soft wheat performance. This is consistent with the Alveograph results, which showed increased extensibility for this composite compared to last year. Overall, the quality of the 2025 Canada Eastern Soft Red Winter Wheat crop is very good. It demonstrates a good test weight and a high falling number indicating no concerns with sprouting this year. The flour exhibits a low ash content and good extensibility, which in turn produce cookies with an ideal width to thickness ratio and spread factor. These results confirm that Canada Eastern Soft Red Winter Wheat is highly suitable for producing a variety of high quality end products.
Thank you, Elaine, Derek, Norbert, Christina, and Lindsay for your presentations and sharing the knowledge of the Canadian wheat crop this year. Please remember, everyone, if you have questions, to use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen to submit your questions. And we have had questions come in already, so let's get started with some questions. Elaine, maybe I will start with you. We had a question come in regarding Canada Eastern Soft Red Winter. The question is it available for export this year?
Thanks, Lisa. Yes, CESRW is available for export. The best thing to do is to contact your exporter and find out about availability. Since we do have the contact information of the person who asked this question, I would also encourage, or we will follow up with providing them with information to connect with the Grain Farmers of Ontario so that they can get a bit more additional information on this.
Great, thank you so much. I have a couple questions for you that have come in. The first one is, what are the downgrading factors for number 3, 4, and 5 Canada Western Amber Durum?
Thanks, Lisa. Just let me pull that up. I didn't have that in front of me here, so I'm going to look for it here quickly. So the data I have in front of me here, Lisa, I don't have it specifically for those grades, but what I can tell you is that in the Amber Durum crop this year, the primary reasons we're seeing for downgrades are severe midge, mildew, severe sprouted, ergot, and fusarium damage. So any combination of those different grading factors would be resulting in durum going down to 3, 4, or 5.
Great, thank you so much, Derek. A second question for you is, what are the steps being taken to limit the presence of genetically modified grains such as soybean, corn, and canola being found in wheat shipments from Canada?
Well, that's a good question, Lisa. So what I can say about that is that Canada's grain grading system has very stringent tolerances for the presence of any type of foreign material, including soybeans, corn, and canola in our wheat shipments. We're recognized around the world for having a very strong reputation for providing very clean grain. Having said that, we do have a bulk handling system in Canada that handles wheat, soybean, corn, and canola using the same elevator and rail infrastructure. So it's not practical nor possible to have a zero tolerance for soybean, corn, and canola presence in Canadian wheat exports. But I will say this, I know that producers and exporters do their absolute best to keep the different commodities separate as they're being handled. However, trace amounts of canola, soybeans, or corn can and will at times show up in exports of Canadian wheat.
Thanks, Derek. Yes, the bulk handling system can present some challenges. I wanted to also add that across our value chain, right from the farm all the way to our export terminals, the grain handlers follow rigorous systems to keep these crops segregated. And they do this through storage on farm and cleaning processes. Canada is known for its very clean wheat. We have documented handling procedures and also physical separation of grain types during receiving, storing, and loading at all locations. So the other thing to point out is that there are no commercial genetically modified wheat varieties registered or grown in Canada. This was mentioned by Scott earlier in the presentation, but we just wanted to clarify that as well. So thank you, Derek, for those answers. So we have had some questions regarding the technical information come in. And maybe I'll start off with the milling and Norbert. Norbert, a question about the eastern wheat. Are there any concerns with sprout damage impact in this year's Canada Eastern soft red winter crop?
Thanks for that question, Lisa. So the answer to that is no, as if you can recall from Josh's presentation, that the last summer was hot and dry, and that led to favorable growing and harvesting conditions. So this resulted to good falling number, which is higher than last year. And not only that, it also resulted to a very low amount of low dawn, or a very small percentage of fusarium damaged kernels. And the good falling number was also supported by high amylograph peak viscosity in flour, which is telling us that we don't have issues with the excessive alpha amylase activity.
Thanks, Norbert. And maybe just a follow-up to that, was there any fusarium damage seen in the eastern crop this year?
No, the amount of dawn was very low, and there was no issues with fusarium damage with regard to eastern wheat.
Great, thank you. Christina, maybe I'll move to you. There's a question about from what date can the 2025 CWRS harvest be received?
Thanks, Lisa. So it would depend on where you are and related to Canada. New crop starts to reach export ports as early as September, and then we'll move on to markets after that. So it just really depends on your proximity to Canada.
And I guess also there would be some combination of the old and new crop, perhaps until the full new crop receives customers as well. Okay, another question for you is, can the rheological parameters of CWRS wheat from the same harvest year change over time, I guess, in storage?
Okay, yeah, thanks for the question. So yes, depending on how that wheat is stored, there could be some changes. Under proper storage conditions, the changes would be significantly reduced. So that means storage conditions that have low temperature, low humidity, and good aeration. So over time, there is going to be some oxidation, which will then increase dough strength and could decrease extensibility. But if you have that proper storage conditions, then you should see minimum changes.
Okay, thank you. And another question for you. Regarding drought conditions and wheat behavior, is there any change in the functionality of wheat under drought conditions?
Okay, another great question. So under drought conditions, we typically see an increase in protein content. So this may change the glutenin and gliadin ratio, which would then impact the functionality. So glutenin and gliadin are the two proteins that make up that gluten. So what we have seen in the past few years when we have seen drought, we did see higher protein and we saw longer phenograph stabilities. So just an increase in that strength. It also would depend on the variety. Some varieties are more resistant to drought and would perform better. But I'd also like to point out this year we did not have drought conditions and we had a very good growing season. So we are seeing typical characteristics of what we would expect for our wheat.
Great, thank you, Christina. Let's move to Lindsay so we get a chance to hear from her as well. Lindsay, you said mixing times for the sponge and dough baking process were longer compared to the no-time dough process. Could you share some information on that?
Sure. Thanks, Lisa. So when we compare no-time dough mixing times and sponge and dough mixing times, usually we see reduced mixing times with the sponge and dough process. And this is because it's a two-stage process, and during that pre-fermentation stage, we get some gluten development when we're making that sponge. And then when it goes into the next mixing stage, because some of that gluten development has already happened, the mixing time is generally shorter than no-time dough, where the gluten development has to happen in the one stage. So at Cereals Canada, when we report our mixing time, we actually include that 2-minute mix that we do for the pre-fermentation stage. So if you were to compare the no-time dough mix times to the sponge and dough, but take out that 2-minute mix, you would see that it's actually less time than the no-time dough process.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Just some more questions that have come in. Norbert, there was one. For a bakery flour using CWRS, what is the optimal particle size for a 78% extraction milling?
Thanks, Lisa. That's a great question. Millers are controlling the particle size of the flour by using a standard sieve, a standard flour sieve. And in most mills, the size of the standard flour sieve is 132 microns. It was mentioned the 78 extraction flour. That means a really good high extraction rate of a flour and straight grade. So in some high producing passages like head reduction, or popularly known as C1, sometimes millers are opening it up to 150 microns. So I would say setting the sieve at 150 microns, which is telling us that the particle size of the flour is at 150 microns and below, is proven to provide flour quality that is suitable for bread making.
Thank you, Norbert. I love these technical questions. And I would say if anybody wants to follow up on any of these questions, please feel free to reach out directly to any of our presenters. Or you can still put a question in the Q&A. If we don't have time to answer it, we will get back to you. So, Christina, a question that came in over the Q&A is to do with the SRC method. And what do the percent sucrose and percent sodium carbonate measurements in wheat indicate? And where can I get the methodology?
Thanks, Lisa. So for the percent of sucrose, that's related to the pentosands that are in the flour. And the sodium carbonate is related to the starch damage in the flour. Our methods are posted on our website. We follow AACC method for this with some modifications. I can follow up if with the method. We should have the contact information so I can share our internal method.
Thank you so much. I think we are through with the question and answer period now. Again, if there are any questions in the future, please feel free to reach out directly. Thank you to all our presenters for sharing your knowledge and insight into this 2025 wheat crop. And thank you to all the people joining us today. You will find the 2025 new crop report, including all downloadable data, on our website at cerealscanada.ca. Some of you will also see us in person at our upcoming new crop trade and technical missions, and we're really looking forward to meeting you and answering any additional questions there. If we don't see you then, we hope you can join us for a future webinar or at a Cereals Canada program here in Winnipeg. Enjoy the rest of your day.